Hey, hey, thank you so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. If you're new here, thank you for giving me a try. I appreciate you. What I do on this podcast is I deliver content that can help you shift the way you think. We're currently in a six-part series of adult children of emotionally immature parents. This is episode 4 out of the 6 episodes. So if you have not listened to the first three, so the first one is what is emotional immaturity. The second one is the roles that we played as children, like how we had to survive. Were you the peacemaker, the caretaker, the quiet one? And then last week we talked about emotional loneliness and self-abandonment. That was a really good one. And today we're jumping into boundaries. Like, why does boundaries feel so hard? Boundaries, my friend Sean Marshall said, boundaries can expose the toxicity in relationships. I remember when he posted that quote, and I was like, it's so true. Every time I'm working with people and they become self-aware, right? We got to be aware without judgment. And they put boundaries up, the people in their life they start struggling with more. And it just exposed just the messiness and the toxicity and the way the relationship was. But also, it's important for us to note as we are working on creating boundaries that we set up the system for people to treat us the way that they do, not intentionally, but it was the way that we kind of learned life. It wasn't like somebody sat down and said, "Hey, Celeste, I want you to learn how to put yourself last," right? Last episode, we talked about when you had to have, when you were lonely and when you were struggling with some self-abandonment. A lot of times it's because you were taught that your needs didn't matter. And it wasn't explicitly taught, but it was taught by the way that you paid attention to how your caregiver responded to things or didn't respond to things. And your mind just adapted, right? And so I'm hoping through these episodes it'll give you some clarity, but also allow you to just notice, right? Notice without judgment. The more you notice, the more you can work on making changes. So we're going to get into that. I just want to thank you all. The Daily Shift episodes have been going really well. Make sure you share them. You know, some people may not have the capacity to go into these series that we do. But the daily shift, you get 2 to 3 minutes a day of some content that can help you really recalibrate, think about things differently. That's where it all starts. That's where it started for me. It started with me giving myself new information, right? I got tired of operating the way I was operating. And so I gave myself new information. And so I want to offer that to you all. I want to give you new information to help you shift the way you think. And that way you can work on doing things different that works for you. So don't forget, these episodes are also housed on YouTube. So if you are a visual learner or if you just want to like play it on your TV or your phone, and follow along because I do provide slides with all of these episodes, you can do that. So why boundaries feel so hard and why that makes sense, right? Because you may be like, dang, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? Guess what? We're gonna learn today why it's hard for you to get it together. The intent behind today's episode is to understand why boundaries trigger guilt, fear, and anxiety, how boundaries are tied to emotional safety, why just saying no advice doesn't work, and how compassion creates real change, right? One thing, if you're a longtime listener, you know it's important for me to help you understand why having compassion matters. My famous line is you're with yourself 24/7. Do you want to walk around with a bully or somebody that's motivating? Right? The more you can motivate yourself because you're with yourself all the time, imagine how much more powerful life looks like with that in your ear. Now, on the flip side, if you're being mean to yourself, imagine how hard life feels. So this episode should leave you saying, "Oh, it's not that I'm bad at boundaries. My body just learned something different." There's a difference with we only look at like our physical health or our mental health, but it's all connected. So you can logically know I need to create boundaries, but body-wise, like physically, it feels hard. You want to know why it feels hard? Because your body remembers what happened when you didn't have boundaries, right? Like, so it's kind of like, this is what I needed to do as a child to get through. But guess what? You're not a child anymore. And so it's so important for us to learn new ways of operating. So, what boundaries actually are, right? We hear this word boundaries, but what are they? So, boundaries, they're not walls, right? They're information. Like your body's literally trying to give you information. So, boundaries will protect your emotional energy. You ever feel emotionally drained or you're giving so much emotionally, right? I know when I started on this career path, I felt very emotionally drained. I always gave so much. Um, they signal needs and limits, right? Being able to put up boundaries will let you know, what do I need? What is my limit? What's my cutoff? A lot of times you don't know what you need. You don't know your cutoff. If I ask you right now, as you're listening to this or watching me on YouTube, what is it that brings you joy? Can you name it off the top of your head? If I say, what is it that you need to be okay, right? Can you name that off the top of your head? If I ask you, what are your limits? Like, what is it that you will or won't do in a relationship, whether it's a partner, intimate partner, or a friendship or a family member? A lot of times you don't have any cutoffs. You don't have any idea on what your needs look like because you were told what your needs were. You allow culture to dictate what it looks like, even if it didn't feel good for you, right? Even if you was mentally exhausted, but this is what I'm supposed to do, right? I'm the oldest daughter. I'm supposed to do this. Who said it? Where is it written at? You know, boundaries support connection, not distance. When you can work on creating boundaries, it allows you to connect deeper with people because you have it to give. The distance won't be there. You know, a lot of times you give, 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 and some people what they end up doing, they isolate because they gave so much with no boundaries. Then they come back, overexert themselves. It's this vicious cycle that happens, and this feeling of loneliness that takes place because of it. When you grow up in an environment where needs were not welcome, boundaries do not feel safe. They feel threatening. They feel like something's wrong, right? So when you try to figure out, well, like, why can't I just say no? Like, I know that I need to go to bed early, or I know that I need this rest because I'm so tired. Why am I having a hard time saying no? The issue is that your body remembers that when you said no before, it didn't matter. And so you learn, like, I got to just keep going regardless of what I need because what I need doesn't matter. And if this speaks to you, I want you to continue to notice when this is happening. When is it showing up? Because over time, you can work on implementing new strategies for yourself, right? That is the key. Small changes, small steps will create big changes. I promise you it will. Why did boundaries feel so unsafe when you were growing up? Saying no led to guilt, withdrawal, or anger. Maybe your caregiver would be angry with you, right? Maybe you found yourself feeling guilty when you said no. Needs were minimized or ignored. So a lot of times as children, especially if you have parents that are like working a lot, living in survival mode, they didn't have the capacity to be checking in with you. They didn't even know that that was needed because they gave you food, they gave you clothes, you had everything you needed physically, but emotionally you didn't. And so if you cried, it was kind of like, oh, why are you crying now? Right? So you learn to not cry. There are people that struggle with crying and they feel so full of emotion, but when they cry, they feel bad. They feel guilty. Why is it that as a human being who has emotions, why is it that you feel bad that you're crying? You're feeling bad that you're crying because maybe your tears didn't matter growing up. They were not acknowledged. I'm not saying that your caregiver didn't care about you. And in some cases, that may have been the case. But in some cases, they didn't know how to care for you. They didn't understand that emotional piece that was needed to get you through some of these moments. You learned connection required compliance. I need to do this so that I won't get in trouble, right? Like no autonomy. One of the things for me as a parent, like I'm big on autonomy and giving choices within reason, and reminding my kids, what life is going to look like. It's not easy, but it's important. I know, especially for Black families, we have this saying of you need to be seen and not heard. Like that's a famous saying in the Black community. That's a really harsh thing to say, and some people may still feel like that's great, that needs to happen, but guess what? We're raising children that will become adults. And if we're teaching them as children, need to be seen and not heard. You think when they turn 18, it's just going to shut off? That's not how it works. So really being mindful, some of the ways you may have been taught about your upbringing and you've like kind of done the same thing, it may not work, right? It may not be the best thing. So really being mindful on how you are operating. And even though as I'm talking about this episode, I'm talking about the way you may have grown up. But I also, if you're a parent, I also want you to pay attention to how you may be exhibiting some of these behaviors in your life with your children as well, because a lot of times, regardless of the fact that we may not have liked the way certain things went down, the reality is that we may be mimicking some of the ways that things went down without realizing it. So if having needs costs you closeness, your nervous system learned to stay quiet. And that is why, as an adult, when it comes to boundary with friends, work, family, kids, partner, it's not there because your nervous system starts to be like, oh my gosh, we're doing something wrong. You have to help your nervous system understand that, hey, we are trying something new, right? In order for that to happen, you have to have compassion with yourself as you're going on this journey. How does this show up in adulthood, right? You feel guilty after you say no, right? Over explaining or justifying boundaries. No is a complete sentence, and I completely understand that saying no can feel hard, but a lot of times we apologize too much. We over explain why we can't. Well, I would go do this for you, but I was working all night, I'm tired. No, I can't do it today. We don't even have to say sorry. Why do we say sorry? Every time, I'm in sessions or I meet people in person and they're apologizing, I'll say like, what are you apologizing for? I did Instacart for groceries and the person was texting me the different stuff because they didn't have certain things and she said, "Sorry that I'm texting you so much." I said, "Can you please not apologize for doing your job? You're trying to make sure you get the right thing." Like, sorry is like automatic for so many people. And so I want you to be mindful that you don't have to over explain or justify why you're putting a boundary in place. It is what it is. If people need clarification or have follow-up questions, they can ask. You cannot help how somebody feels about your boundary. You can't help it. So if you're like, I want to create this boundary, but I don't want them to feel bad, guess what? You can't change how people choose to feel about what you need. Anxiety when disappointing others. Do you feel anxious when you feel like you've disappointed somebody? Do you ignore your internal cues, right? When you're hungry, when you're exhausted, when you feel resentful? This is exactly how it's showing up as an adult, right? Feeling selfish for resting or prioritizing yourself. This always makes me sad when people's automatic thing is to, nope, I got to do this for this person, or I got to. What would they do if they didn't have me? Guess what? If you weren't here, they would find a way. And a lot of times, people don't understand how they are training and teaching people how to treat them because they consistently say yes. It's not that people in your life that are asking you to do these things are bad. It's the reality is that you've trained them and taught them that it's okay to bother Celeste. Celeste is going to do it. She'll get up and do anything for me, right? Your mind may know you're allowed to have boundaries, but your body remembers when it wasn't safe. That's why there's this huge disconnect. That's why saying no feels so hard. That's why it's not so easy to say no because you were taught that if you said no, it was not safe. You had to say yes. You had to always show up. You watched your parents show up for things, especially women. Women do this all the time, especially depending culturally, right? Certain cultures, it's just the norm to um overwear yourself out to like cook, clean, work, and do everything else. And when you're trying to do it opposite, you feel like you're failing because my mom was able to do X, Y, and Z. Why can't I do it? Guess what? But your mom was suffering with a lot of medical conditions, with a lot of emotional struggles. Yes, she showed up, but at what capacity? Like, how much time did it cost her off the end of her life? right? I feel like we shorten our life because we run ourselves ragged and we don't take time to care for ourselves, especially women, right? We are taught to give, 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 but who's given to us? And I can't wait for somebody to give to me. I have to make sure I'm giving to myself. So these are the ways that it's showing up as an adult. These are some common misconceptions that come up, right? When it comes to boundaries and not being able to say no is I'm just bad at boundaries. Are you bad at boundaries or were you taught your boundaries didn't matter, right? There's a difference. It's important to keep that in mind. Another misconception is if I set boundaries, I'll hurt people. You know what? If people feel hurt, you can't do anything about that. So, the opposite is like, not let me be hurt, right? But let them continue to go forward. That's not being fair. Like, you are not being fair to yourself. Healthy people don't struggle like this. Not true. So here's some reframes to think about. Boundaries aren't hard because you're weak. You're not weak. They're hard because you were taught that connection required self-sacrifice, especially for certain people in certain cultures, especially women. I know this comes up a lot in certain cultures when it comes to women, self-sacrifice, put yourself on the fire, F yourself, forget what you need. It's all about the kids, it's all about your partner, it's all about your family. Don't be the oldest in the family, right? So, really being mindful on how life was framed for you, whether explicitly or whether just being a part of it, and ask yourself, is this still working for me? Because if it's not working for me, you have a choice to create changes. Yes, that choice is going to come with a lot of emotions. You're going to feel like you're doing something wrong, but you have a choice to create change. What healing looks like, right? So healing doesn't start with strong boundaries. It's not like you hear this episode and all of a sudden you're gonna be like, you know what, Celeste, I'm ready to say no. No, you won't be ready to say no. It starts with safer internal connection. So from forcing yourself to just noticing, right? I just want you to notice what's going on. That's all. From perfection, all of you perfectionists out there, I need you to work on having better compassion with yourself, right? Know that there's a whole episode of itself. That perfection that you have going on, it definitely comes just from some upbringing, right? And so start to have more compassion with yourself from self-criticism, like, oh my gosh, why did you do that, Celeste? Like, let's say I'm saying this to myself, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Instead of me criticizing myself, how about I be like, oh, I wonder what that was about, right? Like if I made a choice that didn't feel good, what was that about? What did you need? How did you feel? How did you get to that point? Be more curious with yourself because when your body feels safer, your boundaries become clearer. The more grounded and safe that you feel, the more you can actually be clear about what you need. I see this all the time when I'm working with people, right? I talk about their trauma, we make connections, they learn how to get grounded, they start noticing things, and then they start realizing what they actually need. That's what healing looks like. So let's just take a quick breath. That was a lot, right? I hope as you heard this episode on the boundaries, you were able to like get some clarity on like why it may be hard for you to create boundaries, but not that you can't do it, but that as you're trying to do it, it's going to feel a little challenging and that's okay, right? That's okay, right? One of the things, if you can see, if you're watching, so you put your hand over your heart and your other hand over your stomach, and let's just take a deep breath in and out. And we tell ourselves, I'm going to be okay, right? That little voice, it matters. It matters. It matters. So let's go into the homework assignment from this episode, right? So this is what I want you to do. I want you to notice. I want you to notice, when do I feel guilt for having a need? Whether it's to eat, use the bathroom, whether it's to um whether it's to like leave work on time, right? Because maybe the culture at work, everybody's grinding, and you don't want them to think you don't care. So I rather them not think that I care instead of going home because I'm tired and I'm overworking myself, right? Be mindful. What boundary feels hardest right now? What's feeling hard for you to create? Is it with your children, your partner, your kids, with yourself, right? What emotion comes up before I override myself? I encourage you to take an emotion wheel, like Google Feelings wheel, and look up what emotion will come up before I override myself. You don't need to act on it yet. I just want you to notice it, okay? Just notice it. And then, this topic is living in our nervous system, right? So every episode, I'm asking you once a day, I want you to think about pausing and asking yourself, what am I feeling right now? And name it, give it a color, give it something. Where do I feel it in my body? Our body gives us signs that we're not okay, even if we don't intellectually recognize it. So even if the answer is, I don't know, that counts too, right? But I want you to start to pay more attention to what is happening in your body. Now, boundaries didn't feel safe when you were younger, and your body remembers that, right? But awareness creates choice, and choice is where healing begins, right? In order for us to change anything that we have going on, we have to be aware that it exists. If we don't even pause, get off the phone, stop scrolling, stop overworking, stop busying yourself, and start noticing. If we don't notice and become aware of what's going on, how do we create the changes that we say we want to see in our lives? It's hard. So, that was great. Next episode, 531, crazy, episode 5 of 6. We will be discussing reparenting yourself, what it is and what it is not, right? How do we reparent ourselves? We're going to go into that on the next episode. So, if you want to follow me, I have a wellness center located in Stoughton, Massachusetts. You can follow me, stwyt.com, and that stands for shifting the way you think, right? I feel like if we can shift the way we think, life can look differently. So, stwyt.com. You can find that on TikTok and on Instagram, stwyt. And then if you want to follow me personally, Celeste the Therapist, Celeste, the therapist. And if you want to follow the podcast, it's Celeste the Therapist, but there's a dot between each. Celeste dot the dot therapist dot. You can find that on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. So thank you all so much for rocking out with me. I always like to say, if anything I ever say resonates for you, understand you have the power to create change, right? But if you don't work on having faith and believing in yourself, nothing's going to be different. But if you have faith and if you believe in yourself, I promise you, your mind and body has no other choice but to fall in line with the direction that you're taking it, and change can happen. Until next time, beautiful people, I will talk to you later.